My name is Thomas Hurley. I work the late shift at Burger King. Have been for 2 years now. I know how that sounds. It's not exactly a career people brag about at reunions, but it pays my rent. The hours suit me, and honestly, I've always been a night owl. Standing behind a drive-through window from 10 at night until 4 in the morning doesn't bother me the way it would most people. I kind of love the quiet of it. The city slows down. The world gets smaller. It's just me, the hum of the fryers, and whoever pulls up to that window. What I'm about to tell you started about a month ago, and I still don't fully understand it. It was a normal Tuesday, somewhere around midnight. I was working the drive-through alone, which was typical. We're understaffed after 12, always have been. A car pulled up to the speaker, male voice, nothing remarkable about it. He ordered a large double Whopper with cheese meal and a Coke, completely standard. The only thing slightly odd was at the payment window, he rolled his window down just barely enough to slide his card through. His windows were tinted dark, and I couldn't make out his face at all. I ran the card, handed back the receipt, and waited, and waited. He never pulled forward. He just drove off, left without his food. I stood there holding his bag for a few minutes, thinking maybe he'd circle back. He didn't. I set it aside and eventually ate it myself. People do strange things at midnight. I didn't think twice about it. About a week later, it happened again. Same order, same exact sequence. Someone paid at the first window and vanished before reaching the second. I remember pausing for a second and thinking, that's weird. Someone did the same thing last week, but I couldn't quite get my brain to put the two moments together. I just shrugged and ate the Whopper. It wasn't until the third time that something clicked. This was the same person. I was sure of it. And once I realized that, something cold settled into the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to say anything. The food was made, it was paid for, and I was the one getting to eat it for free. So I kept my mouth shut, kept accepting the meals, and told myself not to overthink why some random guy was essentially buying me dinner every few days. That went on for another few weeks. He'd show up every 4 or 5 days, always late, always between 1 and 3 in the morning, always the same order. I started to almost look forward to it in this weird, uneasy way, like, oh, it's been a few days, wonder if my mysterious benefactor is going to roll through tonight. It became this strange little ritual, and I'd stopped feeling creeped out by it. That was a mistake. One night around 2 in the morning, I was on the speaker when I heard that familiar voice come through. I already knew what he was ordering before he finished the sentence. Same meal. And I was already thinking about eating it later when he said something else. Something that made every single nerve in my body go still. He said, and I will never forget these words for as long as I live. I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley. My last name is Hurley. I do not wear a name tag with my last name. It is not posted anywhere a customer can see. There is no way, not one single reasonable explanation for how this man knew who I was. I just stood there, completely frozen. My brain couldn't catch up to what my ears had just heard. Then I started talking into the speaker, rapid, stumbling, asking who he was, what he wanted, how he knew my name. I must have said, "Who is this?" 4 or 5 times. He never answered. And this time, he didn't even pull up to pay. I heard his engine rev, and then he was gone. I was rattled for every remaining minute of that shift. I had no idea what to do. And I had that awful, suffocating feeling that something was very wrong. But I had no idea, standing there under those fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning, just how much worse it was about to get. When I got home after my shift, there was a handwritten note on my doorstep. I stood there reading it with my hands shaking. It said, "I know what you did. You have 3 days." I felt sick, physically sick, like something had reached inside my chest and squeezed. Here's the most terrifying part of that moment, though. I had no idea what I supposedly did. I still don't. I am a 24-year-old guy who works at Burger King and plays video games on his days off. I don't have enemies. I don't have secrets. I'm not living some complicated double life. There's nothing. I racked my brain all night and came up with absolutely nothing. I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment on, just waiting for whatever was coming next. Nothing came. Not that night. The next night at work, he was back. But he didn't even bother with the food order this time. He just asked me to write something down. Then before I could say a word, he gave me an address. Some place on the outskirts of town, a stretch I didn't recognize. And then he told me I had 2 days to deliver $10,000. I almost laughed. I genuinely almost laughed because there was no world in which that made any sense. I don't have $10,000. I never have. But as soon as he drove off, the near laughter evaporated completely and the fear came flooding back twice as hard. I decided to ignore it. I told myself it had to be a scam or some cruel prank from someone I knew. I didn't call the police. I honestly didn't even think of it. That was the second mistake. 3 nights passed. Nothing happened. I started to exhale, started to believe maybe the whole thing was over. I was wrong. I was sitting on my couch winding down after a shift, half watching something on TV, when a sound shattered the entire room. Glass exploding. I hit the floor on pure instinct, convinced someone was shooting at me, heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I finally looked up, I saw the window. Someone had thrown a rock through it. By the time I made it outside, there was nobody there. I called the police. I told them everything, including the address I'd been given. They said they'd check it out. They told me to stay vigilant and that they'd increase patrols in my area. And that was essentially it. Without doorbell footage, which I obviously don't have, there was nothing more they could do. That was 3 days ago. I've called in sick every night since. Not that it probably matters, because this person knows exactly where I live. I can't afford to stop working. I can't afford to move. So I'm stuck here, sitting in this apartment trying to figure out my next move, trying to understand why any of this is happening to me at all. My best idea right now is getting the police to trace the credit card the guy used to pay for those Whopper meals. Other than that, I honestly don't know. I just hope it doesn't get worse than a broken window. I genuinely hope that's the worst of it. I graduated from college 8 months ago with a degree in communications, which, as you can probably guess, has been an enormous help in landing me a stable career. That's sarcasm. I'm still living with my parents. I haven't found a real job, so things are going great. In the meantime, I drive for Uber and Uber Eats, sometimes both in the same night, depending on what's moving. It's not a career, and I know that. But it's money, and it makes me feel like I'm doing something useful while I figure out what my actual life is supposed to look like. I mostly drive on Friday and Saturday nights, usually from 9 until 2 or 3 in the morning. That's when the surge pricing kicks in, and the downtown bars start emptying. It's not technically a night shift, but it feels like one. A few weeks ago, on a Saturday night around 1:30, I was getting ready to log off for the night. One last request came through. The pickup was downtown, which was fine. But the drop-off was far, past the suburbs, past anywhere I'd driven before. I almost declined just for the distance, but the fare was genuinely too good to pass up. The passenger was completely normal, friendly, tired, totally unremarkable. The drive took about 40 minutes. I dropped her off and suddenly I was alone, out in the middle of nowhere at 2 in the morning with a 40-minute drive back to civilization. I turned around and started heading home. Not 10 minutes into the drive, I saw a car stopped in the middle of the road with its hazards blinking. As I got closer, I could see 2 people standing in front of it, both waving their arms. Every instinct I had said don't stop. I almost didn't. But I'm the kind of person who can't drive past someone who might genuinely need help. So against every warning my gut was sending me, I stopped. I kept the car about 20 feet back, rolled my window down just a few inches, enough to hear them but not enough for anyone to reach inside. It was a middle-aged couple. That eased something in me, for about 3 seconds. The woman did most of the talking. She had this frenetic, urgent energy about her, but underneath it was something that felt slightly wrong, slightly practiced, like she'd delivered this exact speech before. She told me there was a collapsed bridge ahead. Said it had happened earlier that day. Said they'd nearly driven off the edge themselves. She pointed down the road into the dark and told me if I kept going the way I was going, I'd end up in the river. I asked what I should do instead. The husband spoke up and described a turnoff about halfway between us and the bridge. Said it cut through the woods, would add some time, but would bring me back to the main highway safely. I thanked them and started driving. Something was off. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't name it. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not taking that turnoff. I kept going the way I'd been going. A mile down the road, I passed the turnoff they'd described. Narrow dirt path, barely wide enough for one car, swallowed almost immediately by dense trees. I kept driving. A few minutes later, I reached the bridge. I slowed down. It was fine. Completely intact. Not a scratch on it. I drove across without any issue at all and made it back to the highway. Nothing happened to me, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept running through it. What would have happened if I'd turned down that dirt road, alone, at 2 a.m? A few days later, the curiosity won. I drove back out there in the middle of the afternoon, broad daylight, which at least made me feel slightly less unhinged about the whole thing. I retraced the route. The couple was gone, obviously. When I reached the turnoff, I slowed down and pulled over, and I noticed something new, something that hadn't been there before. A sign nailed to a tree right at the entrance of the path. One word: dead end. That sign was not there when I drove past in the dark. I would have seen it. Someone had put it up in the days since. I sat in the car staring at that path. In daylight, it looked almost ordinary, just a narrow dirt road disappearing into thick trees. I decided to get out and walk a little way in. It was the middle of the afternoon. I told myself there was nothing to be afraid of. As soon as I stepped out of the car, that feeling hit me. That specific, inexplicable animal feeling that you're somewhere you should not be. I stood at the edge of the path trying to see further in. There wasn't much to see. I started to turn back toward the car. And that's when I heard it. A scream. A woman's scream, coming from deep in the woods, down that path. Raw and awful and close enough to make my blood go cold. I was back in my car and gone before I even made a conscious decision to move. I've never driven that fast before in my life. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't been back. But I can't stop thinking about it. About what that scream was. About what was down that road. Part of me knows I should leave it alone. Another part of me is already thinking about asking a friend to come with me. If I do, I'll record everything. But for right now, all I have are questions and a scream I can still hear when the night gets quiet enough. This one happened a few winters ago, and it still gets under my skin every time I think about it. I was 26, 8 months into an overnight security job at a commercial warehouse complex. The shift ran 11 to 7, and I was always the only person on site. There was a supervisor I could call if something went sideways, but most nights it was just me and the camera feeds. The complex sat in an industrial stretch at the edge of a small city. Quiet area. Almost no nightlife. The warehouse stored industrial equipment and bulk supplies. Nothing that valuable, nothing that would make it a target. Most nights followed the exact same rhythm. Clock in, walk the perimeter, settle into the security office, monitor cameras, do another patrol every hour. Simple, uneventful, the kind of job that makes you feel slightly invisible. The night everything changed started normally. It was cold, snow coming down but nothing heavy. First patrol came back clean. I went back to the office. Around 1:30 in the morning, I got a motion alert on one of the loading dock cameras. This wasn't unusual. The system was sensitive. Wind, animals, anything could set it off. I pulled up the feed, watched for a minute, saw nothing. Just the empty dock and snow drifting through the floodlights. But the alerts kept coming. Every 10 or 15 minutes, same camera. Every time I checked the feed, I saw nothing. But here's what started to bother me. Whatever was triggering it always seemed to happen right at the edge of the frame. Like something was there, just barely outside the shot, not wanting to be seen. By 2:30, I had 6 or 7 alerts from that one camera. No others. Just that one. At 3 in the morning, I went outside to check it myself. The snow had mostly stopped. The complex was completely silent. I walked the full perimeter of the dock with my flashlight. All bay doors locked. No footprints in the snow except mine. I went back inside. 20 minutes later, I heard it. A metallic scraping sound, deep inside the warehouse, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. I checked the interior cameras. 6 feeds. All of them showed empty aisles. I started to feel it then, that creeping feeling that I was being watched, being played with. I explained it away. Wind. Buildings settling. Something mechanical. I went back to monitoring. An hour later, the sound came back. Louder this time. The dragging, and then a sharp bang, like something striking one of the interior doors. I cycled through the cameras again, nothing on feeds 1 through 5. When I got to camera 6, the screen went black. 3 seconds of static. Then it came back. But the angle had shifted, just slightly. Just a few degrees to the left, like someone had moved it. I had no more ways to explain it away. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and went into the warehouse. The interior was enormous. 80,000 square feet of industrial shelving arranged in long aisles. During the day, it was bright and loud with forklifts and workers. At night, the overhead lights dimmed down to save power, and everything sat in this yellowish half-dark that made distances hard to judge. I was maybe halfway down the main aisle when I heard the footsteps, somewhere to my left. 2 or 3 aisles over. Definitely a person. The rhythm of a person walking. The moment I stopped moving, the footsteps stopped too. I stood there in complete silence, not breathing, trying to slow my heart down, waiting. Then I called out, firm, steady, announced I was security, told whoever was there to make it easy and show themselves. Nothing. No response. Not a sound. I finished that patrol in a state of pure, controlled terror, checking every aisle, expecting at every single turn to come face to face with someone. I never did, which was somehow worse, because I knew with absolute certainty that someone was in there. Not seeing them didn't change that. It just meant I didn't know where they were. I didn't see or hear anything for the rest of the shift. But I never stopped feeling watched. When my supervisor arrived at 7, I reported everything. Maintenance did a full inspection. Nothing. No signs of entry. No explanation. And I could tell from the way people looked at me that they didn't really believe what I was describing. But I was there, and I know what I heard. This last story is the one that still terrifies me the most. Outside of police and a few close family members, this is the first time I've told it fully. A few years ago, during a gap year between high school and college, I took a job at a 24-hour gym. I worked a lot of overnight shifts. The place ran on key cards, completely automated. Members checked in, worked out, left. 1 or 2 employees on site at any given time. Most of what I did was sit in the office, watch the cameras, do some light cleaning, occasionally chat with regulars. It was in a rough part of town, but most of the people who came in were friendly. It was one of those places where everyone knows each other because not that many people actually use it. I was working an 8 to 6 shift one night, one of those long, slow grinds. By 2 in the morning, I'd already done multiple walkthroughs, finished all the paperwork, and I was exhausted. I sat down in the office to watch the monitors and give my legs a rest. At first, everything was normal. A few late-night regulars came and went, people I recognized. Then I noticed someone I didn't. A man using a treadmill in the far corner. New guests weren't unusual, so I didn't immediately react. But something pulled my eye back to him. I pulled up his treadmill in the system, where I can live monitor all the equipment. He was running 9 miles per hour. That's fast. Really fast. But what actually made me lean toward the screen was that he never stopped. 10 minutes. 15. Not once did he slow down or break form. I looked closer at the camera feed and something in my chest went cold. He was wearing ragged, worn-out clothes. His hair was long and wild, but his face never moved, not once. He was just staring straight ahead, completely expressionless, completely still in every way except his legs. Then I looked lower, his feet. He had no shoes. He was barefoot, running 9 miles per hour on a treadmill, barefoot, for 15 minutes. Staring at nothing. I was alone in the building with this man. We had a policy requiring shoes. I decided I'd use that as an excuse to go speak to him, tell myself it was routine, tell myself there was a simple explanation. I got up, left the office, turned the corner into the main floor and stopped dead. The treadmill was covered in blood. His feet were tearing apart. Every step he took, blood was splattering from his ankles, pooling on the conveyor belt, dripping onto the floor. His face was still completely blank, mouth hanging open, eyes locked straight ahead. He looked like he had left reality behind somewhere and had no intention of coming back. I was terrified. Every instinct told me this man was dangerous, but I still raised my voice, told him to stop. I don't even remember the exact words. I had to shout over the slapping of his feet against the belt. He didn't respond, didn't turn his head, didn't slow down, just kept running, mouth open, eyes forward. I yelled again. He said something then, in the coldest, most hollowed-out voice I've ever heard in my life. "Are you there?" Not even a question. Just those 3 words. Delivered flatly, without a breath, without slowing. He wasn't panting. He wasn't winded. He just kept running and kept saying it. "Are you there?" Over and over. The pool of blood on the floor was spreading. I turned around, went back to the office, and picked up my phone to call the police. Before I dialed, I glanced at the monitors. He was staring directly into the camera, running, bleeding, mouth open, eyes locked on the lens like he could see me through it. And then he started screaming. Not words, just this raw, inhuman sound that went straight through the walls. He hopped off the treadmill, left it running, and disappeared from the camera frame. I started clicking through every feed, frantically searching. Couldn't find him. Living room camera, empty. Weight floor, empty. Stretching area, empty. There was one camera left. The employee hallway. The hallway that is supposed to require a keycard to access. He was standing in it, 6 feet from the office door. I don't know how he got in there. But I didn't stop to work through that question. I lunged for the lock. About 5 seconds after the bolt clicked shut, the doorknob rattled. I called 911. He was screaming again on the other side of that door and shaking the handle as I tried to explain to the dispatcher what was happening through my own shaking voice. The dispatcher told me officers were 5 minutes out. I pressed myself into the corner of the office and waited. His screams were deep, almost beyond what a human voice should sound like, and he kept going for 3 full minutes. I genuinely believed in those 3 minutes that if that door came open, I was going to die. Then it stopped. The screaming, the rattling, all of it. Gone. I checked the cameras. He wasn't anywhere. When the police arrived, I made them sweep the entire building before I would step out of that office. They found nothing. He was gone. I answered their questions, drove home, and quit the next morning. I have not been back to that gym since. I still don't know what that man wanted. I still don't know what was wrong with him, or what would have happened if I had been 1 second slower getting to that lock. I think about that sometimes. Just 1 second.